Welcome to Whiteboard Wednesday. I'd like to think for a few moments about where leadership begins. When I was a student at Central College in Pella, Iowa, Dr. Kenneth Weller arrived as the new college president. And his first year was very interesting. There were some on campus who wanted to protest. They didn't feel he was doing anything. I guess they had heard no grand edicts, there were no big pronouncements, not a whole lot of massive change took place. They thought he wasn't doing anything. But the reality is, Dr. Weller was very busy. He was spending time in the sororities, the fraternities, in the music department, the art department, the athletic department. He worked with those who were leading the religious life on campus. He was meeting with students and faculty and staff. He was learning to put names and faces together so that eventually he could call everybody on campus by their first name. This springboard of listening, this time of getting to know the people he would serve and live with, served as a springboard to many years of incredibly distinguished leadership. I had the privilege of observing and living through that first year, and then it was that I learned my first leadership principle. Leadership begins with listening. I later discovered that it's even a biblical principle. Think about Ezekiel. We read that he sat among the people down by the river Chebar for 7 days, for a complete period of time, before he went out and began to prophesy. It's very similar in the life of Nehemiah, which is our focus now for the next few moments. Let's read how the book of Nehemiah begins. In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. The first thing that Nehemiah did was to inquire. Now, because of his situation, the fact that he was cupbearer to the king and was 800 miles away from his Jewish brothers and sisters, he was unable to go and mingle among them and be with them, as Dr. Weller had done with the students on the campus. So he did the next best thing. When one of the leaders of the Israelites, a trusted friend of his, came, he inquired, he asked him and listened to him and what he had to say about the people. And that obviously was a springboard for his future leadership as well. Because once he had inquired about them, we come to find out that he was able then to identify with them. When he heard about the sorry state of the Israelites, he didn't say, well, it doesn't surprise me, they're such a sinful people. He didn't pray, Lord, forgive them and help them. Instead, this was his prayer. I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. His listening drew him into an intimate identification with his people. And once he had identified with them, he was then able to intercede for them. Let's listen to what his prayer was once he had identified with them. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand. Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Effectiveness of leadership is directly proportional to the dynamic prayer life of the leader. Begin everything with prayer. Do more than pray, but nothing until you pray. Because here's what happened. Once Nehemiah prayed, once he interceded, God led him to the right involvement. He was able to become involved. Nehemiah knew that he would need the permission of the king in order to go and do anything with his fellow Jews. And so he prayed and said, give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. And the king said to me, what is it you want? Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it. This is the more than pray. It's doing the job of leading to get done what needs to be done. And you know the rest of the story. The king amazingly released Nehemiah to go and be with his people. He went back and returned to the Israelites, and he led them not only in rebuilding the wall, but in rebuilding the nation. And it all began with a springboard of listening, which shouldn't surprise us because that's where leadership begins.